returning to order at 1:33 p.m. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. We provide an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on any agenda item or during the hearing of visitors portion of the agenda. On items other than public hearings, speakers will be allotted 1 3-minute presentation, regardless of the number of agenda items the speaker wishes to address. If you're here to speak and have not filled out a registration card, please see the City Secretary, staff at the registration table outside the auditorium to provide registration information so that staff can contact you if necessary. If you have handouts, please let us know at the beginning of your presentation and staff will distribute those to council. Is there anyone present who would like to speak on a work session agenda item? Seeing as no one is registered, we will now recess the regular session and convene to work session with a report from our city manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It's a big day today. We're presenting our FY 2023-2024 budget. And if the team doesn't mind, we probably want to get that on the slide or on the screen behind the council. There we go. Thank y'all. Of course, filing a budget is one of our biggest team efforts that we do every year. It's obviously required by the charter, and it also represents one of your most significant decisions of the year because there's so much policy included in the dollars and programs being discussed today and in the document. And if you think about the budget cycle as a marathon, I don't know, do we have any marathon runners on council? Not on CMO either, so don't feel bad. But if you think of a budget cycle as a marathon, today kind of marks the turn back towards the finish line. We're not done. Maybe we're at mile marker 22 or 23. And I say this because we've been working together for quite a while this year, ever since our April budget retreat. Council retreat, as well as at each budget and audit meeting and each city council meeting. We've been working to dive deep into key issues which have really informed my presentation today. And like I said, we're at the 22, 23 mile marker, which means we have a couple miles to go. We're not quite done, but today, and maybe more accurately by Friday when I upload the budget document onto the website, is when I pass kind of the baton to the council for your deliberation, to bring the budget home and get finished with this marathon that we run. My team up here at the table today, most of the CMO represented, remains committed to answering any questions you have as we finish out this budget cycle and making any changes that you might suggest over this next few weeks. Wanted to start with your budget priority or your council priorities. This document has lived for the last couple years and no changes, of course. We discussed this at our April council retreat. You affirmed this was our mission, vision, core services, and our values. And you'll see themes, or the public will see themes of our values and where we're proposing to put our dollars. So our values linked to dollars is still present in this budget process. Our plan for today, the overview you're seeing on the screen now, is we'll cover obviously our priorities and core services. I'm gonna do most of the talking on that first bullet point. I'll be supported by our deputy city manager as well as assistant city manager a couple of times through that first bullet point, and then I'll turn it over to Nick and Paul for those remaining 5 bullet points. I want to note that we're joined by just about every department head here at the city behind me in the gallery. And I'd argue that we've got probably the biggest collection of leadership, quality leadership talent in the region represented behind me. And I know they're here to support me, but also to support you with any questions that you have. So at various times, if you want to speak to a department head, we'll just get them up here and they'll come and answer any questions that you have as well. All right, let's talk priorities. I've got a few slides on each of these items. I'll be focusing my comments on again and bringing Paul and Nick in for the remainder of the presentation. I always like to start, as the council does as well, my budget presentations around compensation, employee compensation. And the reason is, it's such a critical factor in our success, because we can't do anything without the 1,600 men and women that wake up each day to serve our community. I don't know how to repair potholes. I don't know how to fix water lines. I can't resolve a domestic dispute, and I can't fight a fire. But we've got 1,600 people behind us that do know how to do it, and it's important we take care of them. So start my comments with compensation. The FY 23-24 budget will include a 5% across the board general salary increase for all employees. This comes after a 6% increase last year in 2022, and I think it's telling, if you look at the colorful chart on the middle upper portion of the screen. This is the World at Work survey on the left that shows over the last 7 or 8 years the salary increases through their survey of 28.5%. And then you look on the right-hand side and see what the city of Waco, the Cal section of the slide, has done. We're at 27.75%. We're really on target with what the world is doing. And I think that's telling to say we're keeping pace with maintaining a workforce that's adequately compensated in most areas of the city. I want to note that each 1% change in salary for our workforce reflects about a $1.1 million cost to the general fund. So that 5% increase effectively is about a $5.5 million investment that we're making, a year-over-year change. It's a significant investment, each 1% that we're doing. On top of the general salary increase, earlier this year I'd asked our Human Resources Department as well as Assistant City Manager Holt to conduct an in-depth analysis of police and fire wages. The results of that were really meant to help us in our meet and confer and negotiations, as well as collective bargaining negotiations that are going on still. But the results of our research showed that we're more than 10% behind the market in many of our police and fire positions. And that was surprising to me, as it might be to you as well, but really appreciated the team's response in crafting a 3-year compensation strategy. The end result will be by fiscal year 26 that our police and fire sworn positions would be at 100% of the market median, meaning they'd be paid at a market rate. Obviously, when we're dealing with police and fire, it's a couple of our largest departments, and being more than 10% behind is not a move that I can resolve in year one. It's going to take us a 3-year strategy to get there. But speaking to fiscal year 23-24, we're looking at a total of 8.9% increase for our sworn police employee budget. And for fire, it's closer to 11%. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask Assistant City Manager Holt to discuss a slide on public safety investments, and he'll be able to further discuss any elements of compensation or take any questions you might have on compensation related to police and fire.
Right quick, Bradley, the police at 8.9 and fire at 11, that's just for this year, or is that over that 3-year period you were talking about?
That's correct. That's just this year.
Okay.
So when we're dealing with that number, you've got the 5% baked in for the general, and then effectively to deal with the market change, you're at 3.9%. That plus the 5 gets you to 8.9.
Okay.
Anything to add there, Paul or Nick? Okay.
No, that's right. Oh, I will point out before we leave this slide, directionally, I think we're still consistent, but the math on the top is the 28.5 versus the 27.75. If you take You don't just add those percentages up. You should take the percentage of each year as the increase and the increase of the percentage from year to year. So basically, I did the math. My college math teacher would be upset if I didn't point this out. Because it should be 32.29 total versus 31.29, so we're still behind. But you see what I'm saying?
I do. That's really good.
Yeah, effectively. 103%, 3% on 103%, and then on top of that, it gets bigger than 28.5.
Yeah.
Directionally, it's the same.
I'm really surprised that this feedback would come from you.
You got it. All right. That, Mr. Menig will be very
But
happy.
Sorry, really quick. For the rest of us in the audience, could you answer essentially the increases for police and fire to get us to market? That is in addition to and separate from the annual year-over-year increases for base salaries across all of our city employees.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
One thing to note on police and fire as we get a little more specific is they're kind of a unique group of people because we have, you know, if you reach certain ranks as well as time in service, there's different steps in your compensation. So they have a unique compensation plan that when I talk about police and fire wages, I always look at the cumulative of the whole department and talk those numbers through instead of like saying the commander in this section is going to get a 5% raise, because it's not necessarily accurate to say that, because they may be at a certain step, or a 10-year officer may not get 5, they may get a little more or a little less based on the steps they're in and years of service that they've served the city with.
So, Holmes here again, just to follow up on Councilman Ewing's observation, I agree, because part of this is not just a COLA type raise, part of it is just the correction of a market salary. So we're kind of baking it all in, so the number looks a little bit higher than what we were, you know, the 5% is kind of real, maybe, and the market correction on the salaries is what we're talking about on police and fire. That's all.
On benefits, I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this slide, and then I'll turn it over to Deputy City Manager here in a moment. But on the benefits packages this year, we really had to dive deep. As we briefed the council on a few weeks ago, we had a pretty significant challenge in front of us in the health plan. A $2 million deficit due to some high impact claims, as well as higher utilization than planned, higher utilization trends. And so really applaud the efforts of budget and human resources to address the deficit and really focusing in on strategies that would produce financial relief to the fund, but not result in plan design changes or benefit changes to the employees. Or said differently, not reduce benefits to the employees. As a result, one of the key strategies deployed here is we're moving to UMR, a new administrator of our plan, to bring new discounts while maintaining more than 95% of the access to our physician network and prescription plans to our employees. Additionally, you know, we focused on solving the $2 million gap from general fund reserves primarily. That's how we plugged the gap in the health fund. Of course, we had some options to solve that problem. We could have gone to the employees and said, you're going to pay more for your health plan coverage. That's often where a city will go. It's not where we've gone. This is, I believe, our 4th year in a row. Is that right? Missy, there's Missy back there. 4th year in a row where we've solved health plan challenges in this manner, meaning we haven't gone to employees. My strategy in prioritizing this approach is because our employees on the lower end of the pay scale would be dramatically impacted if we asked them to contribute more to the health plan. It's regressive right, in the scheme of things. It really can eat up big portions of any compensation changes if we ask them to contribute more to the health plan. And ultimately, the health plan's goal is for each employee and hopefully their families to be covered and to have access to adequate health care so they can get to work and contribute and provide service to the citizens. So I'm pleased that we're doing that again this year. I don't know that I will always be able to have that occur, but I'm pleased to say it's the fourth year we've been able to do it. And finally, on benefits, wanted to note that it's the first time in quite a while actually, we're proposing to bring a cost of living adjustment for our retirees. They have, as we've briefed the council on a couple of times recently, it's been quite a while since we've been able to do this. And those retirees have been hit by inflation just like every household in the community. I do want to note that we're proposing a recurring cost of living adjustment, and it's prospective, which means it will look forward and not backwards. As we briefed on in the past, changes in cost of living COLAs for retirees can be really cost prohibitive. It's why we haven't done them in quite a while. But this year's revenue gains, as well as a new law passed by the state legislature, really allowed us to look at this differently this year. We have scheduled the Texas Municipal Retirement System, TMRS, to come to a budget audit in August, I believe. Is that right? Yes. In August to further outline COLAs and our position related to the fund, related to the TMRS fund. That way we can continue kind of peeling back at this onion and inform the council as well as the public in a transparent way about the retirement fund.
On this slide, I really appreciate something, I don't think you mentioned it, but the full-time employee turnover is dramatically reduced. And I think that that's something that is worthy of noting and celebrating too.
It's definitely something that the HR team really tracks, and of course we invested in a kind of strategic look at HR in recruitment as well as retention last year, and definitely pleased to see it as well, Mayor, because as you know, and everybody that hires people in this room knows, turnover really produces a lot longer gap than you expect. When you have an employee turnover, you have to recruit them, you have to hire them, you have to train them, and it can be a long time until they're effective, much less really good. Right. And so there's a hidden cost of turnover that can be really impactful to a city.
That's what I was gonna hit on is do we have any estimates of what that cost of turnover is to be able to compare to what we're spending as a, hey, this is what we're spending and this is the sticker price you see, but really it's against what we would lose if not maintaining or improving these benefits.
Yeah, certainly, if you think about police and fire, we have real data, real numbers that we can speak to on overtime costs, as well as anecdotally. I'll use the word frustration. It may be too strong if you think, Ryan, correct me, but the feelings of mandatory overtime can produce some frustration in public safety in particular, that they don't want to work every weekend or every shift, have to be called in to provide that service. And so that turnover is really important to watch because it affects people's mental health and their abilities to be at home with their families. So that's a hidden cost, but we can certainly provide the direct cost as well, if it's something you're interested in seeing.
I'd love to see that, yeah.
Okay.
And then just while I have you, I noticed the $2 million from the reserves contributed to the health plan, and you made mention of that being the case for the last several years. Is there any plan or insight or wisdom in looking at creating just a budget line item so that it's not something that we're having to reach into reserves for, or, looking at increasing what we have allotted for it?
Certainly, that's something that, I think maybe a different way of putting it is that the funding of the reserve is also a component of that per employee cost per year number. And I think as we think about moving forward in the future, and we're going to be putting together a committee of employees to help us work through this, but I expect in the future is not only cost increase, but the need to continue to maintain that reserve will have an effect on that per employee cost per year, and ultimately could have some effect on the amount that employees pay as well. So I think you accomplish what you're getting at through that overall cost per employee.
Just regarding Councilmember Ewing, and especially in dealing with police, because it's 18 months to stand up a new officer, isn't that right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's, and what you were saying about, you know, training and even new employees, non-PD or fire employees, it takes probably a year to get folks onboarded, so that's money that, the numbers are probably huge. But I know PD specifically is 18 months, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, especially in jobs that require judgment. That's incredibly
You kind of want
important.
that, right?
You kind of want good judgment and train them in the Waco way, right? Whether it's police or fire or others, it takes a little time. Takes a little time.
I believe that the decrease in turnover also, and I know in the past couple of years, I can say since we've been here, getting to, I hate to use this term, but market wage, we won't say living wage, but has been a priority for us because we knew that we were doing a disservice by our people. And so I think that has been a priority, and it's evident in this 7% decrease in turnover. Do we have a goal? Is there a standard that, you know, the success looks like if turnover is this percent? Do we have a standard?
I'm looking to my HR expert,
Come on down.
Missy Pashowski.
Missy
If
Pashowski.
you don't know, we can get back to him, Missy, but is there something
No.
something you're
I mean,
aiming at?
that was just, you know.
Good afternoon, I'm Missy Pashowski, the HR Director. So in the HR literature, anything over 10% is considered something you should start looking at. Well, actually, that first line only shows the first 2 quarters
Okay.
of this fiscal year.
So nobody quit, is what we're saying.
So we're yet to see the full fiscal year yet. That's just reporting on the first 2 quarters of this fiscal year.
Thank you. 10%.
Definitely the goal of all these things is to touch that number and to reduce it. And then just touching on the cost of turnover. So HR literature also says that it costs 6 to 9 months of an employee's salary to replace them. And so, but I could definitely take the turnover number and give us a number if that's something y'all are interested in.
That'd be great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Missy.
Right quick, I agree with what Councilmember Barefield is saying about getting under the 10%. I mean, that feels good. The 1.1 million basically is, I see that as sort of an indirect comp. So that's another, could you say we're going from 5% to 6% effectively. We're picking up the extra million, or the city's picking up the extra million instead of the employee. So another benefit, which, as Councilmember Barefield said, we were very intentional these last years about getting salaries corrected and getting COLAs back where they need to be. The other, and I think this appears later in the deck too, because I want to get clear on how this COLA, the retiree COLA, manifests itself. What number are we looking at for this budget? Is it the 3.8 million? I don't. And again, I think it's further back. I think there's more detail further back because I see it's 2.4 further back and it's 3.8 here. I'm trying to
On a
figure
general
out.
fund slide, 2.4,
Yeah.
overall city, 3.8. So you have the other funds contributing a
Okay.
portion of that.
Okay, thanks. I wasn't thinking of that. So 3.8 million. Were there other options in here, or is there other ways to look at it, or did you have to slot into one number? That number seems larger than what I had in my mind initially,
They-
at least
they
for
have-
year one.
They have packages, I guess I would describe them as, where you can choose different ones, and they quote them related to your total percentage contribution to TMRS. And, this puts us close to 18% of compensation going to TMRS. I think it's 17.86 or something like that. Right now, we're around 15 budgeted, so we can increase that overall percentage a little over 3% to pay for it. So when we meet with the council in August, at the August budget and audit meeting, I think it's the 8th, I believe, but when we have that meeting, we'll have them there, and they'll go through each one of those in detail and show you the costs, and you'll see the different options, and we'll be able to explain further why we picked this one. We think it's the most effective way to address the concerns that we've received from the different, from retirees.
And this engages us into a commitment in future years too? Is that what Bradley said?
It does. The ongoing percentage of compensation contributed to TMRS goes up to pay for it going forward.
Do we know about, because it's 3.8 million every year, is it that magnitude, or what are we talking about?
They've.
Because we've been doing zero for the last 10 years, right?
Right.
We need to make that up a bit, but I want to be careful about committing future councils to some program that,
Okay, we can.
So I will say, I mean, for any TMRS COLA, the effective date would be the first of the calendar year. So they're all, TMRS is calendar year based. So we definitely have time on making a decision. The budget we've built has the 18% as the contribution, which is one of the 9 different plans that TMRS offers as options for COLA. This is the most cost-effective reoccurring COLA option. So there's the ad hoc, which are one-time. There's these groups of 3, so they're at 30, 50, 70% of CPI as the basis for the COLA. So there's these new ones that the legislature enacted this year, and then there's the reoccurring ones that go backwards and forward, which are the most expensive of the group. And so this one was the most cost-effective of the reoccurring options. Like I said, there are the ad hocs, which are one-times that have different rates. But no matter what we did, if we were doing a COLA, our contribution rate would have had to go up. And so what the future contribution percentages will be are going to vary based off of our contributions to the plan, employees' wages, cost of living, as well as the returns on the investments in the plan. And so we've been fortunate for what we've been doing that we've been able to drive down our overall contribution percentage. So statutorily, our required percentage is about 13.92% for 24. And so we've done a good job of contributing extra to build in that extra capacity.
so we budget our salaries and comp, which is, I mean, it's the biggest, in any company you're involved in, salaries and benefits are the biggest overhead item. Is this COLA with retirement included, baked into our salaries and benefits lines? Because
Yes.
or is that a separate line item, or, because I noticed it's not 5%, if it's not perfect 5% year over year, last year's salaries to next year's, it's more like, I've got it here somewhere.
Yeah, as
more
we
like,
get into the
11%.
presentation, Jim, one of the big challenges that you and we and citizens are going to experience with this particular budget is it's really difficult to compare year over year.
Yeah.
Because we've pulled out significant expenses and put them into separate funds. And so you have, within the reconciliation, I'll call it, huge adjustments down and huge adjustments up, because you're moving dollars out and then you're raising for retirement, you're raising for raises and those other things that Bradley's going to be talking about. So it gets really, it's a real challenge doing apples to apples year over year, because you're not talking about the same apples in the bucket anymore.
I
And an
think that we
example
need
of
to
that-
make an effort to be as transparent as possible. 'Cause
Sure,
that's,
absolutely.
because
We
if we
agree.
tell the public it's 5%, a little bit higher on police and fire, I think we need to be able to show that in pretty clear, transparent fashion. Plus this COLA. So I know it gets complicated, but if we need to boil that down to a table or a slide,
Okay.
I'd like to be able to do that.
We will, and we didn't today because it's a very complicated, almost confusing effort. But we'll discuss that more with the council at the budget and audit meeting and show you some of the details behind some of the changes to reconcile back to
Got it.
the new numbers.
Yeah, particularly when we haven't been doing it for the last 7 years. It's kind of, that we're jumping the retirement COLA. And
Sure.
it's a little bit different. I get it. But thanks.
I think for any retirees that are watching, because I know it's been of particular interest to multiple retirees, this conversation, I'd just invite you to stay tuned for that. I think Paul said it was on the 8th of August, the budget and audit meeting. That is a publicly posted meeting. TMRS will be there. They're going to outline the 9 potential solutions that Nick referred to. And again, the one that I've got baked into the budget is the least expensive recurring COLA that we can do.
Got it?
And we'll get more into the details on that at budget and audit. And if the council desires a shift, certainly we're ready to put our noses down and figure it out. All right. Our next, we're going to kind of continuation slide on benefits and some pretty creative work happening here. I'm going to ask Deputy City Manager Emerson to cover this one.
Thank you, Bradley. As Bradley mentioned, one of the goals here was to ensure that benefits to employees were not reduced. And so there has been, as he mentioned, some creativity to figure out ways to actually enhance benefits to our employees. And so some of the things that you'll see on this slide meet that criteria. For instance, on mental health resources, we are not that I'm aware of, but know of any other cities who are actually providing a direct mental health benefit other than the employee assistance program. And so what staff has worked on and we're able to provide to or recommend is the lowering of the mental health copay from $75 to $25, as stated on the slide, critical in a critical incident program. Oftentimes you see these things or mental health pay in incidents like this, specifically for public safety, but we see the benefit for all of our employees and that this is something that all of our employees should have access to. Quite frankly, I'll tell you, we saw a lot and made a lot of referrals during COVID.
Yes.
Working with, and folks were calling in and needed that type of help. And so I think this is really a great enhancement to our benefit package for our employees. In addition to catastrophic leave, and provides the employees the ability to provide or donate their sick leave to other employees. I personally have worked in another organization where incidents happen all the time and you aren't expecting that.
Correct.
And so you do have employees that are willing and able to donate some of their leave to other employees to support them during that time. And so this is another thing that will help, is an enhancement for our employees, because some people, you don't know what you don't know till you need it, right?
That's right.
And so lastly, continuing our commitment to.
On the catastrophic leave, we have not had that before.
No, not where employees have the ability to donate sick leave.
Have we, and I've, in running a couple of businesses and a couple of our employees out there know how this, it's kind of, we've got to make sure that it's administered and managed properly. Because you take advantage of that. Is it a blind pool that it goes into the days, or is it just somebody gets sick and I'll say, I want to give my days to Josh, but I don't want to give them
Let's
to,
get Missy.
Missy can
I don't wanna
talk
give them
about
to-
program design.
because it can get dicey on, you want to give it to the girl in accounting, but you don't want to give it to the dude in HR or whatever, you know, and
Yeah.
it's gotta be,
Before we let Missy speak, because Deidre and I worked in the same place for a while, and then I moved on to another city. But my experience in each of those communities that had this program was that employees want to be generous. Employees, as Deidre said, don't expect to ever deal with a serious heart issue or cancer or some issue, and they may run their time down, but by and large, employees that don't walk down that road want to be generous to employees that are dealing with catastrophic issues. And so it's been a goal of mine for a couple of years. Ryan's smiling because it was part of the last collective bargaining negotiations when I said this a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, that I wanted to create a program like this, because I just see a lot of value in the personal connectivity of donating time for the betterment of another employee. So, Missy, you want to speak to Councilmember Holmes' specific question?
Yes.
that you don't want it to be personal. You want it to be a blind pool.
No, I heard you. Yeah, I heard you.
That's the whole.
I wasn't sure where you were headed on that one.
I hear you.
Give up your time, it should be for anybody to use for anything. If they have an allergy and want to take an extra 3 weeks off,
Well,
they
that's,
get to dive into that pool or whatever the reason is.
yeah.
I
Missy,
know
you wanna?
at the other companies that I've been with, it's been more of a management decision on,
Pool.
off,
Yeah.
off of just catastrophic allowances and not part of a pool.
So there are a lot of different ways to do a catastrophic leave policy, and our policy is in still draft format, so we're still working through the details. I'd say we're probably modeling it the most after the city of Houston, and they actually do it where an employee makes a request and employees donate specifically to that person, where we don't maintain this big pool of leave. And HR is the one who takes the request for leave, and we also take the donations for leave.
That's where it could get inequitable, in my opinion, but I'm not gonna stand in the way of it. It's hard to manage, because some people may ask for the time off and nobody wants to donate to them.
Missy, do you want to speak to the current approach that we have allowed employees in the past to run some negative balances and pay back?
Yes, we also have an advancement of sick leave. So if an employee couldn't get someone to donate, they can also ask for an advancement of sick leave, and then they're able to pay it back. There are a variety of different options that are available to employees. Also, employees have to maintain a balance of 480 hours in their bank before they're eligible to donate. For police and fire, their time may be a little bit different. But it's really nice because anyone can donate to anyone. And we may try it for a year and learn and adjust the policy as we go.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a question, Bradley.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we, on the catastrophic leave, do we allow our employees to accumulate their sick leave, or do we take it away from them after a certain?
They do accumulate sick leave, so for, across years, I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the year, they don't lose their sick leave.
There's no cap on sick
Okay.
leave.
There's no cap.
There's
So-
no cap.
And
So that would-
that's why I think you see people so willing, and again, I don't want to belabor the point, but my experience has been when the call from HR goes out and says, hey, we've got an opportunity to, we're on a catastrophic leave issue, if you don't respond within, like, what would you say, like 5 minutes, you don't actually get to donate to that employee because people are so able to quickly donate that leave time on behalf of their fellow employee. It just, I think we'll be surprised that it won't be about me giving to Paul. It will be about me giving to the need that probably somebody I never even knew has a need. I have a balance that I'm able to contribute 30 hours to this individual.
Missy, can I ask you real quick while you're at the podium? What is our current, let's say you go to your primary care physician, what's the copay on our health care there, and what's the specialist copay?
So if you go to a Baylor Scott and White provider, it's no copay.
No copay
No
for your,
copay.
okay,
Any other primary care physician, it's a $50 copay.
okay,
And then for all specialists, it's a $75 copay.
okay. Well, in that regard, hearing that, I'm really enthusiastic about what we're doing here with the mental health copay and bringing that down from 75 to 25. I know I say this all the time. I do serve on our local behavioral health network board, and I think as our deputy city manager mentioned, the pandemic really brought mental health and behavioral health to the forefront, and hopefully reduce some of the stigma of, our people seeking mental health treatment and getting the treatment that they need. And so I think this is a wonderful enhancement to our benefits package. I think it's definitely humane, and I think it's a good business decision as well in terms of retaining and attracting employees. So I am all in favor of what we're doing here. Especially, I love that 8 sessions at no cost as well. I think this is just the right thing to do. And these are just some great policies here on this slide. So I applaud HR and city management for helping us retain and attract the talented folks that we've got.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of creativity that's been applied here, and I think that it's going to be something that hopefully our employees are really going to be able to benefit from, and as a result, morale will be stronger and the organization will go further.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. I do want to not let that opportunity pass to say that on the critical incident program, this is our first step. I don't think this is the end of where we're going to go to. I think there's more work to do, and I know the team that's around it feels that way as well. So I suspect we'll continue to add components to support our employees.
Yeah, I think it's going to be incredibly meaningful, I think, to see, how our team supports one another. And we already see that in other ways, but this will be another unique way to get to really see people rise up and help in times of need.
Yep, good stuff. Oh, you got,
And so I just want to finish this slide.
did we not get through it? Deidre, I'm sorry.
Because it does continues to show our commitment to equity within our organization and outside. And we, along with our communications team in the development of a language equity plan, the addition or the added level of skills of pay that includes for reading and writing with $100 a month stipend really helps around bilingual pay, and the added option for other languages. And we are beginning to see requests for other languages other than Spanish. So this really does help enhance our employee benefits as well.
Anecdotally, I know you don't create policy around one example, but we've had an example recently at the zoo with a guest that I can't even remember what language it was. It was Chinese. Yeah, and we have employees that luckily are able to answer the call, and with tourists coming in, we are becoming more of a destination where that's helpful to have employees that speak other languages. And the example at the zoo was actually a medical issue that we needed someone to be able to speak a language and support and comfort a guest. And so really appreciate the work here on language equity and bilingual pay. All right, let's shift gears for a moment, talk infrastructure. For the past few years, the council and staff have really been staring up at a pretty big challenge from an infrastructure standpoint, and putting numbers to it, it's a multi-billion-dollar backlog that grows by the year, by the way. And that backlog was developed over the course of decades and really will only be solved by years and years of continued investment. And I'd like to include this chart. You saw it at a prior budget and audit meeting as well, but I like to include it because it really shows the momentum and the effort by council over the last few years to really try to solve this infrastructure backlog, and at the same time add new services and parks so that residents can thrive in each of our neighborhoods. And on the slide it depicted, you see less than, I guess 10 years ago, the CIP budget was $19 million. And the upcoming year we're looking at right at $250 million. I can say, and we'll show you some of these details here in a moment, that this CIP will touch each and every council district with meaningful street work, several new parks and amenities, as well as ensuring from a citywide perspective, we make progress towards a new landfill, which everybody cares about, a new transfer station for trash, an expanded Bullhide wastewater treatment plant, some really significant projects represented on that far end of the chart. We've outlined a financial approach for fiscal year 23-24 that allows for up to $127 million of governmental CIP with $94 million proposed to be funded by debt. That's on the far right-hand portion of this slide in blue. $94 million to support the governmental CIP will be in the form of debt, and about $29 million will be funded with cash. That's in the orange. The majority of that being used for the street capacity program that I'll further outline here in a moment. You see kind of where these dollars are going. Capacity streets, Spiegelville Road Bridge, significant new funding for parks and golf as well as fire. These are really significant approaches here that will make a big impact in our community. Parks-wise, I'm going to speak to that in greater detail here in a few minutes, but I did want to highlight a couple of the street projects and bridge projects. There's $52 million of work in the program for the upcoming year. $5 million of that will go to support construction of Spiegelville Road Bridge. That's not the first time we've allocated dollars to that project, so we're getting closer to reality on being able to replace that bridge, which is, if you've not driven it, it's undersized and inadequate as defined by TxDOT standards. It really needs that work. And then also we've got $2 million to support the design and engineering on the ultimate replacement of the new road bridge, which again is another large bridge that we own. It's our obligation, east of Franklin Avenue over by the Walmart. You can think of it. That's a really sizable big bridge project.
Yeah.
$2 million for design, so you can start doing the math. It's going to be a big number down the road for us, but we've got to get it designed and engineered in order to start programming for construction in a future year. Those are two of the major projects I wanted to highlight on the street side. Additionally, we'll have some commentary around Fire Station 4's relocation here in a few minutes. $6.2 million. I'm pretty excited about that one. Fire Station 4 is on Spate currently. It's our second oldest station. Not seen it. It needs some TLC and love, and we're going to do that by moving it, replacing it on LaSalle Avenue. Pretty excited about that. We have hired an architect to design that station. I think it'll be really helpful in furtherance of the LaSalle small area plan that we did in the last 2 years, and really will serve as a very nice station for the fire department, but also as kind of a beacon of hope and rebirth on LaSalle Avenue. So we do have $6.2 million committed to that as well.
I'm excited about that one that's next door to my office.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I'll be getting calls of, if they're not working one day, I bet Alice will be calling me.
Not my fireman.
But no, it's exciting to think about. It'll have a similar impact, I think, that the new station on 25th, 26th did in that corridor, of kind of a moment of rebirth and a high-quality, well-designed building on a corridor, that'll have a nice impact.
It's going to bring a lot of impact on LaSalle. There's a lot of folks that are trying to bring up LaSalle, and this is just going to add to it and going to make, me and District 2 very proud of our new fire station on LaSalle.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, Holmes here on this one. Again, we start with $2 billion of capital projects. And my hat's off to you guys. I'm trying to prioritize the ones that we're trying to tackle this year, you know. That maybe looks like a big number, that 127. It is historically. But in the context of everything that we need to be doing, it's a pretty small fractional number. And we've got the capacity right now to address some deferred maintenance. And so as you guys, again, I commend you for trying to figure out how to prioritize these and cover the city in the best ways that we can. My question is there's 250 total in that previous slide, right? CIP, the 90, and roughly half of it is in general. And so the other half is across the other utility funds. Is that debt to cash ratio of about 75-25, is that consistent throughout the other utilities or the other funds? Roughly.
We didn't break it out. We got a future slide on that.
A
but
lot
it's
of the
not-
questions, a lot of the questions I'm going to ask today, I'll follow up with you on, and to get tables and stuff and data, but I'm curious about that.
That's a great point. We didn't divvy up that chart in the same way. Unless, when we get to there, I'll let Paul and Nick speak to it if they can. If not, we'll have to follow up. But good point. You know, the cash, I wouldn't get in our minds that we're going to be able to have cash contribute in a real significant way each and every year, because typically these programs are funded almost predominantly with debt. We have a unique year, as Paul mentioned earlier, this year, because we're proposing to add new resources in our street maintenance fee that we'll cover here in a minute. And that's one of the reasons the orange is showing up a lot more significantly than, say, if you looked at it last year. Is that fair, Paul?
It is. And, you know, we talked about at the last budget not meeting the relationship between the street maintenance fee and fund and the street capacity program. The street maintenance funds allows us to make that cash contribution over to the street capacity program, which I believe is the next slide in the deck here. And that actually is the orange that you saw on the previous slide, is that street capacity program funding. And you'll see that as we move forward through the budget.
Thanks.
Good segue. Council probably recalls, I think it was at this presentation last year, I mentioned that, you know, the $2 billion backlog of infrastructure is dealing with the streets that we have and not dealing with adding capacity in high growth areas. And that it was a hope of mine that we could spend the year thinking through how to deal with some of these roads that are frankly just old 2-lane county roads that subdivisions have popped up in and around. You know, it was a hope of mine to be able to address that with new lanes and new capacity. So that's what we're seeing here on this map, is the street capacity program map that we discussed on June 27th, as Paul referenced. And we got into a lot more detail, obviously, at that meeting. But I wanted to cover it because it's a significant new program for us. You know, we've designed the street capacity program to be funded and advanced over a 5-year period. And it would be targeted entirely to the 5 streets shown in, I guess it's aqua or blue-green. It's kind of showing up weird on this slide, but roads like Flat Rock, 12th, Chapel, Warren, and Spiegelville. Those are the roads that we're working towards in the 5-year window. And then the roads in purple are those that are kind of the tier 2 that would come in years 6 through 10, let's say. The roads in that aqua green blue color represent more than $133 million of construction costs. Mostly to add the width and the sidewalks adjoining it, right-of-way acquisition, design, all of it. And then additionally, in that $133 million number is about $20 million of utility work under the roads to ensure that we're not coming back and tearing out work that we funded recently. So that's those 5 roads. represent $133 million worth of work. If you start adding, looking at that next 5 years, the other purple, I think it's purple color on the diagram, that's another $118 million worth of work. That's a really significant volume of work that within our current tax rate and debt rate structure, we won't be able to fund and incorporate into a CIP without the discussion that Paul mentioned on street maintenance to move into the street capacity program. I will note we're taking this program, we're taking the approach a little differently than we have here in Waco in the past. We're proposing to cash fund this program, and we're proposing to have a sunset review. So we're proposing to have like a 5-year program, and this will correspond to the street maintenance fee as well, that I'll talk about in a moment. So that over the course of 5 years, this council and the members that continue to serve over that 5 years can decide, was that a worthy fee? Was that a worthy investment? Do we want to continue that in years 6 through 10? It'll be a decision point that can be made, and that's why we're proposing to cash fund it, so that a council's not locked into debt service and long-term commitments. It'll give us a chance to approach this model in a way that could be pivoted from if we need to.
Well, I appreciate the 5-year and the sunset provision and the cash model here. I think that is a way that shows the public pretty transparently what we intend to do with the street fee in terms of these, in terms of this capacity program. Several of these roads are out in my district, out in West Waco, and I know the city just is wrapping up Mars and Old Hewitt around Midway High School, which is in the city of Waco. And one of the big improvements there was adding sidewalks, which really has contributed to the safety of so many of those children that go to the high school there, who take bicycles or who walk to school. So in addition to meeting the needs of vehicular traffic, what these road capacity expansions will also do is make it a safer place for non-vehicular travelers. I know there's families with strollers going down some of these county roads. I know there's young children on bicycles. I know that there are joggers and pedestrians, and they have no sidewalks in what's arguably in my area one of the highest growth areas of the county. And so these are needed for a variety of reasons, in addition to just maintaining and really upgrading these roads for the capacity of traffic that they see, but also making them a safe place for the residents that live there. So I really appreciate this. I fully support this, and I appreciate the good work the city management has been doing to put this plan in place.
Well stated on the pedestrian safety. We're making a variety of improvements in the core. I can think of some District 1 projects we're doing around school safety and sidewalk enhancements. And, we think of the road network as dealing with cars, but it's also pretty pivotal that we keep our pedestrians safe as well on the core and on the edge of town. Let's talk street maintenance fee for a moment. The map was the good slide. This part maybe not as fun to talk about because it's a significant fee. It's $10 a month for each single family unit in town, growing to $12 over the 5-year window, and that would be dedicated towards street maintenance. And I think one of the headlines I wanted to provide here is our total expenditure on street maintenance due to this fee will go up significantly. $28 million over the 5 years for street maintenance projects increase over what we were going to be able to fund. That's meaningful money that will go predominantly in the core of Waco to overlay streets and do other forms of maintenance as well. I will note, and Paul will cover this a little bit here in a few minutes. He's referred to it a couple times already, but he's got a slide on it in a moment. The street maintenance fee it'll be its own fund. So it'll be set up to where those dollars can only be used for street maintenance. And, so it'll be a business unit or fund approach that, again, Paul will cover here in a few minutes. As I mentioned earlier, the street capacity program and the street maintenance fee are kind of paired together in some respects. They'll both have the sunset review at 5 years. Again, that'll allow the council to decide, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because we know that the juice provides the money to redo the streets, and the squeeze is the $10 fee on everybody's water bill, and per residential unit. $10 fee it's a significant charge. We'll show you some data here in a few minutes on a slide that, shows the total stack of each fee and water rates and utility rates and compares it to inflation. I think you'll be pleased to see some of those numbers compared to inflation. $10 is a big fee, but it feels like we're going to be able to support it, and hopefully the council feels like you can support it from a public standpoint, so that we can get some more roads redone.
Bradley, I think when we talked about this during the Budget and Audit Committee, I made a reference to the $10 fee. I think folks really want to see their residential streets fixed as well as the main arterial and capacitor street. So I put that out there. So are we thinking about that so that our residents won't feel so bad about paying $10 extra if they see their street being worked on, their sidewalks being worked on? I just want to make sure that that's out there because I hear it all the time.
Yeah, our residential streets, particularly in District 1, 2, and 4, have needed rebuilds. There's street maintenance, right? That's the easy stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's the rebuilds and the rehabilitations where you got to completely tear up the street and start over. Those are the more expensive approaches, for sure. And a lot of that work is in your district, Councilmember Bearfield, as well as Councilmember Ewing's district. So I included this map to try and at least start indicating that, Councilmember Rodriguez, we are hearing you.
Okay.
The work.
As long as you hear me.
We are definitely hearing you. The work we've got planned in the Better Street Waco program, shown in, I guess that's black on the screen. You start to see where we're planning. The orange is in design. The green is what we've completed. And honestly, the program that Amy Bollarley, Highlands team created, really, I thought it's very strategic, and we can do another briefing on it soon if the council desires. But the green streets predominantly were streets that needed maintenance approaches, crack seal, some overlays, the easier things. And then we moved into the high traffic streets that Councilmember Rodriguez was discussing. And the last kind of, the last front to fight on is the one that Councilmember Rodriguez is talking about, which is the true residential street rebuilds. And we've got a few of those programmed. We've got many, many more to do. And that's where, when I talk about kind of it took a generation to get where we are, and it's going to take years to rebuild out of it. That's going to take some really significant efforts, but I think we share in the desire to get to where each resident can see and feel positive momentum in the street program. It may take a while until we're right in front of their door,
Oh, yeah.
but they'll see the Duttons, and they'll see the Spates, and they'll see the Mars, and then they'll know we're working into neighborhoods as well. And that's why I love showing this map, because especially in the context of the street capacity program, where we're investing so much money on just a couple of streets, it's important to show this volume of streets that we've already touched as well as plan to touch in the short timeline, so that people see we're in every nook and cranny at Waco.
Yeah, because we're asking not just for the street fee, but we're also putting other fees in their bills, so. As long as, I believe, and I've talked to folks, as long as they see something in their neighborhood or, you know, that's working, that their money, they feel like their money is working to make them have better streets, better sidewalks, safety, schools and all that, they're okay with them. I mean, they don't have a choice. We're putting these fees there, but at least they can see that, yeah, we're working out in your neighborhood and we'll be there.
So maps like this, and I didn't mean to cut you off, maps like this is kind of something that needs to be continually communicated as your dollars at work. I mean, I think that in the conversations that we've had from 2018, if you're going for a $3 million street fee, and here we are today at 28-ish, okay. That's tremendously increased capacity. And the thing about it is it's never top of mind until I'm writing a check.
Yeah.
So it's never top of mind that, oh, this road needs to be repaired until I have to write the check. And I'm like, what is this? What is this $10? This is your dollar at work. And, you know, if it's one of those things, you know, I'm gonna say communication, it has to be reiterated in a manner that if the Public Works team has to have a shirt on the back of the vest says your dollar's at work, you know, then that's probably what we need to see, because we have to keep it top of mind for our residents, what that means. I was talking to some kids yesterday, and I said, and you mentioned generation of maintenance. You know, I told them, I said, when you go from only spending $3 million to spending over $20 million, things change. It's huge. And I said, and this is for your children. And so those are the things and the ways that we're gonna have to reiterate. I mean, nobody wants to spend $10 more.
Yeah, it's hard for some
But
folks.
we can't, unless you want it to stay the way it is, we don't have much of a choice.
Well, and when I think about the street fee, I agree on the how imperative it is to communicate, because when I think about it, I think it's not a new system of payment as much as how are we gonna pay for this? It's, this work has to be done. We need to be continuing to do our Better Streets Waco program, but we've got to increase capacity on these other streets. This street work has to be done. Some of this is the result of a growing city where county roads, old country roads are now getting a lot of traffic, foot traffic and car traffic. Other is a historic old city that frankly has a lot of significant deferred maintenance. And somehow or another, streets get funded by taxpayers, and somehow or another, the taxpayer is gonna have to pay for this. And so the question is, how do we pay for it? And I appreciate a diversified approach where, in my opinion, the street fee still allows us to have a property tax rate reduction. It still allows us to keep those significant residential property tax exemptions that we implemented last year in place. And the street fee, the way it's drafted, takes the burden off of residents and shifts it primarily to big box retail. And so again, this is going to get paid for somehow. The question is just, how do we pay for it? And the fee that we, or staff has developed, I think really is a smart system that has a diversified approach to funding critical infrastructure. We inherited the situation. You know, a lot of old infrastructure that needs to be repaired, rising construction costs, we inherited it. But I think this allows us to maintain our exemptions for homeowners. This allows us to do property tax rate reductions across the board, and also shifts the burden to those users who are really driving a lot of the traffic. So again, I don't see it as a new fee. Technically, that's the case. it's not, what it really is how are we devising a way to pay for this infrastructure?
Right, and I mean, the ability to sunset in 5 years, if it's not working, is also proof that we're thinking about not burdening or handcuffing other councils. We will have an opportunity to prove, has this worked? Is this working? If not, we do it again, you know, we do something else. Now, it will be paid for. This is a incredibly creative way to do so. It is really just about how we message.
And that's the thing, how we message and how we show this particular map or portions of it to the folks that are having to pay. And I know we're saying $10 is not a lot, but to some folks it is.
I mean,
And so I think it's great that we're doing I've always been excited about the streets. I've always said, hey, come on, let's fix them. So it's not that I'm against this, it's just that I need to be able to tell my constituents, this is what's happening, and this is what's gonna happen. And I know $10 is a lot for you right now, because I'm hearing that, but also hearing that if they see the work in their neighborhood, they're okay with it. Because it's a convenience for them as well, when we get all these streets and maintenance and all this done. It'll be good for the residents that live in that area.
It is, that's well said, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you know, it is a significant add to someone's budget, $10. And the element that came to mind, you know, those residents that, you know, they live in a certain neighborhood, they work in a different neighborhood, and they've got to get there.
Yeah.
They've got to get there, and we need them to drive on decent streets, whether it's on their block or at their place of business, you know, or at their local grocery store, along the way to their local grocery. You know, I think about these, you know, as we talk about communication, we probably need to think about it as it's going to be in your neighborhood, but also your fee is supporting your community and your journey to your place of work, your place of worship, your place of shopping, because it'll help broaden people's perspectives about what the fee's going for.
Yeah.
But well stated. And,
Thank you for that, Bradley, and thank you for your staff. And,
sure.
you know, I always get excited about our streets. I don't have a life,
I'm glad, because we're gonna keep talking about them for a long time.
Real quick.
Well, we should.
Before we jump off of this, I want to second and third and fourth everyone's comments up here. It maybe goes to say, but we are elected officials, and it helps when you're standing in front of someone's house to be able to point to the street behind you and say, we got that done. So I'm glad that is being set up here and being put into consideration. I just had a couple of operational questions. I pulled up the Better Streets Waco website in tandem with the slide we have, so it's, you know, essentially just the live version of that screen cap there. Noticing that there is and I zoomed in and looked around, so maybe I missed it, but 0 contract bid out right now across our city as far as what stage that's in. For people checking it out right now, it's no purple lines anywhere on the map that I could see. And again, I pulled up the website too and looked at that. So one, is that a stage that is really quick and that's why they're in and out? Or two, is it a stage that's tough to get to, so you know, they don't have a lot in there?
Yeah, we'll put
3 could just be a bug. I don't know.
No, we'll put Amy on the hot seat and see if we can get an answer, and if not, we can answer in the future as well, Amy.
Amy Berlarley, Highland Director of Public Works. So we have a few projects that are getting close to going to purchasing, some major projects that are in the offing, so I can get you a list of those.
That'd be really helpful. And I know that we're also working towards implementing like the online bid system. Do we foresee that probably helping this process, or?
I think that will be tremendously helpful. The contracting community has been asking for that for quite a while, so we're really grateful that purchasing is moving in that direction.
That's wonderful. And while I have you, if you can answer this, that's great. If not, you know, I can check in after the fact, but do you have an idea of, roughly how much time each of these lines that we're seeing on the screen, regardless, green, red, purple, orange, black, and others, once that process begins, so once it goes from, into planned, about how much time these projects sit in each bucket from, how long are they in plan before they get to design? How long are they in design before they get to bid, so on and so forth? I think that'd be helpful for us to have as people are approaching us with questions on road work.
Yeah, that's highly variable. It really
Yeah.
depends on the type of project. If it's just a preventive maintenance, thin overlay mix, that's a lot quicker than if we're doing a Fifth Street reconstruction. So I can get you a list that says, typical residential street with this type of work would
Yeah.
take this much time in planning and design and procurement and construction. So
I think that'd be
we put that
very
together.
helpful.
We'll get you a follow-up on that, council member. I think that'd be informative. Deidre and I were just talking about, scheduling a fuller briefing for a work session a couple times a year, so Amy and her team can speak to this and get into the nitty-gritty of each street and street type. So appreciate the line of questioning there.
Yeah, and I appreciate the work you and your team are doing as well. I know it's, you guys do everything from the giant, I can zoom out as far as I can for the entire city of Waco on better streets, all the way down to individual one-off blocks. So I appreciate the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Holmes, here, just before we get on the slide, just so I'm weighing in on the street fees, and I wish we didn't have street fees, but I think we have to pay for these streets somehow. I think the combination of both of those slides shows all the work that needs to be done. We have to pay for it some way, either through general or this fee. I just don't want people to say we're stacking them in another fee, because I think we're making a thoughtful decision on kind of a user fee arrangement where, particularly where the larger commercial businesses that are handling more traffic are paying a little more of the street fee. And I know this needs to be messaged carefully and thoughtfully. The sunset, as Councilmember Bearfield has pointed out, and we all agree, the sunset is an important part of this, just to see if it works. Because if we didn't have it in the street fee kind of construct, we would be pulling it out of general and leveraging, which we're at a spot there where we have to be careful about leverage and cash flow and debt service coverage and all that.
Oh, yeah.
So I as much as I want taxes to be lower, okay, I'll in. But if we want to get this city in shape, we've got to fix the basic streets here. And this is another way to think about how to do it in a creative way, in a thoughtful way. And if it doesn't work, we'll take it back off the table. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is we have to address these streets. I mean, look, they're all over the city, and I think anybody can point to some street that's within a block or the block in front of them or a block away that we need to fix this thing. It hasn't been worked on in 50 years. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to accelerate that now. And the only way to do it is to be thinking about this. I know that we talked in budget and audit about maybe creating exemptions around that. I don't know if we do that in year one, exemptions around the $10 if you're retired or don't have a car. I mean, you can get pretty scientific on it, but
Yes,
at some point, if we can put a little more science in how the exemptions might work on that.
We'll bring you that in the actual ordinance conversation and then from a rollout standpoint, we don't see this getting started in October. We don't think it'll hit the bill until January. So we definitely have some meat to put on the bone regarding exemptions for transit-dependent population in particular. So we'll have some future conversations about dialing it in. And we've assumed a certain level of exemptions within the funding strategy as well. Okay. I do want to, again, my mind's always racing when y'all are providing commentary and asking questions. And one of the things that I said at Budget and Audit that I want to say again on these fees, and because most of the feedback you probably hear is from residential customers, residents, citizens. And one of the things about the backlog we have and why the fee approach I think is more equitable to use a term that sometimes we overuse, is a lot of our commercial properties, industrial properties, don't see increased values over their life. They see flat values over their lifespan. And so if you use the tax rate only for them, they may pay good rates in the early years, or the good amounts of money in the early years, but over time they effectively are paying lower because their appraisals are not doing this. And I can think of a couple, I won't name any names, but there's one in a large property in District 1, hundreds of thousands of square footage in their industrial facility, and it was on the tax rolls at like $6 million. And so if you were working, and they drive trucks all over our streets, local streets, by the way, causing damage. If you charge that customer through the tax rate to deal with their streets, you get basically nothing to deal with that street impact. But if you go with the fee approach, it's based on their NAICS code and their traffic volume, and it's much more scientific and charged to their actual impact on the street network. And to a residential customer, that feels like a more equitable approach to charge the business in that environment more dollars and through a fee approach versus, say, their tax rate, which would be generating you virtually nothing. And if y'all want some examples like that, I can add some additional commentary to it, because I think it would be compelling if I was sitting across the table from a resident, or out at a residence, as Darius mentioned earlier, and saying, yes, you're paying $10, but here's the reason that works, is because the large industrial customer that drives literally hundreds of trucks a day on local streets is going to pay Y. And the Y is based on a scientific methodology of its traffic. I think that's compelling if you can dial it in a little bit. It's a little, you got to put some numbers behind it. But to me, it makes sense that's a better approach to funding a street program and more equitable to our residents. All right, let's talk business activity CIP. That was the other portion that Councilmember Holmes had mentioned in the $250 million program, part funded by governmental units. Now we're moving into the business units like water, WMARS, solid waste. You'll see each of our allocations here. Paul and Nick, anything to add on cash? Did y'all get any?
We'll get you the exact number,
Okay.
Councilmember Holmes, but the ratio here is much less than what you saw
Okay.
on the governmental side, and that's primarily because on the governmental side, you have the fee freeing up that revenue to be cash contributions. Here, you don't see that same thing happening. I think the other thing worth pointing out with the business activities portion of the budget from a capital perspective is you have single projects here, for example, Bullhide. It's almost $50 million just for a single project. The entire governmental CIP, less TIF, is about $50 million. Solid waste, one project, $14 million. That's how much we're spending on streets on the governmental side. So you have much larger projects here that are certainly less conducive to cash support. But budget and audit will have the breakdown for you here. But I think Councilmember Holmes, it'll be 95.5.
Yep, I see
Probably.
that.
So.
Thank you.
That's helpful. As Paul mentioned, a couple big projects in here. Certainly, I'm excited to see that the DAF 72-inch line. That's the raw water line that supplies water to the DAF plant. There's an existing line there. Having a second line will give us a level of redundancy that's pretty critical. That I'm really looking forward to that investment, $6.5 million. Additionally, we've, as Lisa Tyre briefed you on recently at a council meeting, the lead and copper dollars that we're putting into the CIP. You're representing there $5 million to support that program. That could be not enough. That could be too much, but her research is ongoing, as she mentioned at her work session, and this will be our kind of our hold number for that. $46 million for Bullhide. We've got permits working through TCEQ now. And that's a pretty sizable expansion from a dollar standpoint, and I think it gets us, is it a doubling of capacity there? Paul, is that about right? And then lastly, our first construction dollars at the landfill, at the new landfill out off FM 939 and TK Parkway. Excited to see those working into our business unit CIP as well. Because as y'all know, we're on a short fuse related to the filling up of our existing landfill.
There were dollars already in this year's budget that were already allocated for these things, correct?
For some of these, yes. There's been some design dollars in previous years.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
If you'd like we can get you a summary of those that are kind of already in progress. There's one in Parks I'm going to highlight in a minute that has quite a few dollars already allocated, and we're kind of completing the allocation. But if that would be helpful to you, so you have a better sense of the total amount we're allocating over years, I think we'll mark that down as a future information request.
Thank
you. All right. I'm going to, unless there's questions on business activities, I'm going to move over to public safety, and actually wanted to give Assistant City Manager Holt a few minutes to talk maybe a little bit about compensation, but more completely about the public safety improvements that we're bringing beyond compensation. So, Ryan, you want to take it?
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Mayor and Council, we're right in the middle of meet and confer process and collective bargaining with both the Fire Association and Police Association, so I won't go into too many specific details as to what we're looking at in the contracts as those negotiations are still ongoing. But I'd like to add Mr. Ford talked earlier about a 3-year plan to get our police and fire to the midpoint of our peer cities to make our positions competitive across the board. One of the things that might not have been clear on the previous slide was that as we move from somewhere below 95% of our peers and then to 97.5% and 100% in the third year, we're also going to be considering that those peer cities will also likely be moving their midpoints up. And so we have baked into working with Paul and budget staff, baked in a move that we anticipate the other cities doing, what we're seeing in the industry. And so we've made those proffers to both police and fire. So far, they've been received well. We're still in some negotiations about some further creative things that we can do around their employment that makes it better for them as well as the residents they serve. This council has made significant investments in public safety in the last few years, and this slide will show you that the recommendation is to continue to do that. Both for police and fire, their vehicles really are their offices when they are out and interfacing with our residents. It is both figuratively and metaphorically the vehicle in which they interface with our residents. And so for their regular vehicles and their specialty vehicles, we just have not in the past replaced those in a way that keeps the fleets in a manner that is required to provide Class 1 public service to our residents. And we've implemented and hope to continue that, a vehicle replacement program for both police and fire. The apparatus replacement, as all of y'all know, those apparatus are extremely expensive for fire. This year's proposal is that we replace one ladder truck and one hazmat truck. The ladder truck really is going to be kind of a specialty vehicle compared to our other trucks in that it would be placed at Fire Station Number 1 on Elm, and when you consider the changes in the downtown environment and the neighborhoods around the downtown, the population densities are increasing, and the potential for high-rise buildings in that area are increasing as well. And so we've worked extensively with the fire department, and they're recommending a specialty ladder truck that's a tiller truck. You may have seen these in places like New York and San Francisco, where the tail end of the vehicle is actually driven, and it will allow the trucks to get into tighter spaces in urban areas, along with additional special equipment. Additionally, for fire apparatus, we're looking at a hazmat truck replacement. The current hazmat truck is over 11 years old. And as industry expands in Waco, we're seeing more and more of those hazardous material calls. And so it's important, again, to get those frontline equipment taken care of. On the police side, we're proffering to replace the PD's armored rescue truck. It's an unfortunate fact of the times that as we get more and more critical calls, that armored rescue truck is deployed more, and it's important that it be able to service our residents in a way that is respective of a Class 1 environment. We talked to both Chief Victorian and Chief Summers about what could we do to not only take care of our employees better, but how do we service our residents better? And from a police standpoint, it's really about, Chief Victorian's response to us is really about that response time, and how do we get to our residents in a way that instills confidence in the police department and provides a better service to them. The response improvement package that Chief Victorian proposed to us is about 3 new officers additionally to those that you've approved in the past. There will be 3 other officers that we're pulling over from grant-funded positions to the general fund that will bring that total up. And then when we were talking to Chief Victorian, she really wanted to talk about both dispatcher, communications, and our crime scene unit. Both of those are staffed fully by civilians, and when you think about response time, sometimes you don't think about these 2 units, but dispatch in particular, they are the first responders, right? When you dial 911, they're the ones that pick up the phone, and we have done along with HR, a market study, and we're looking to increase the compensation. That is a extremely high-stress job with very little appreciation, and we're looking to reinforce those positions so that we don't have turnover there. Just like police officers, it takes a tremendous amount of time to get communication specialists up to speed to work all the positions in the 911 center where they can be effective at every position. The crime scene unit in particular, so the communications group, that's about 28 positions. The crime scene unit, the Waco Police Department civilianized the crime scene unit in the late 90s, where a lot of departments at the time were using sworn officers, and the chiefs at the time decided to civilianize those positions and get the officers back out on the streets and rely on highly trained, very specialized civilians to work the crime scenes, those complicated crime scenes, and then be responsible for that evidence in court. And what we've seen is that we have tremendous employees in that area. Right now we have 7 positions. We don't quite have 24/7 coverage with the crime scene unit. We're working that way in future years potentially. But what we found was that we were requiring a minimum of a bachelor's degree and highly technical training, and then to be very responsible and responsible for that evidence that was collected. And when we did a market study, we found that we were significantly behind market. And so Chief has asked that we combine crime scene and communications as part of this package. On the fire department, I've talked about the apparatus replacement. The news station, we have a new station coming online, Station 15, out off of Ritchie Road. And in the past couple of years, you've seen us add partial positions so that when we finish building that station, we'll be able to staff it fully. The 5 firefighters in this package would be the final number of firefighters for Station 15. And then we, just like we did with Chief Victorian, we talked to Chief Summers about what is it that can help us service our residents better. And Chief Summers really talked about the impact of mandatory overtime on his firefighters. And so he worked with budget to figure out what that breakover point of paying overtime versus hiring new firefighters is. And so we're going to try sort of an introductory package of hiring 6 new firefighters and follow them and identify the potential overtime reduction. Particularly, in every public safety department, you're going to have overtime. But it's particularly that mandatory overtime where a police officer or firefighter has come in for their shift, and they expect to go home to be with their family at a particular time, and because of staffing shortages or events, they're required to hold over. And sometimes that can be for an additional 10 hours or 12 hours, and that can really cause fatigue and layered trauma that can further increase potential trauma for those firefighters. And so in the manager's package, we are suggesting to add 6 new firefighters. I know the question always comes up about where are we on police officer hiring. The good news is that an academy started yesterday, and Chief Victorian has 11 officers in that academy, which will leave her with 21 vacancies, but there's some good news there as well. Due to increased efforts on recruiting, she has 91 applications at the recruit level, but she also has 10 applications for lateral officers. And those lateral officers, thanks to negotiations with the Police Association, we're able to acquire lateral officers, bring them in with experience at other agencies, shorten their training period, and get them on the streets. And the police department has seen some good success with that. So things are looking brighter. We're trying to do some creative things. The chief is really doing some creative things in recruiting, and trying to make that a little bit better.
Ryan, just real briefly,
Yes, sir.
Station 15 at Ritchie Road, are we expecting that early 2025 to open up, or do you have a timeline on that?
I should know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I
don't
should too.
remember.
I'll have to get that to
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Q1.
Quarter one.
Q1.
Q1 25. We'll get,
We'll get a specific date for you.
Thank you.
thanks, chief.
That's all I have on public safety.
By the way, just clarifying, I was not calling you chief, I was saying, thanks, Chief Summers.
I heard you.
Okay. I just don't want any chiefs to get sensitive about it in the room.
This report, and it just shows a commitment to public safety and a commitment to deploying creative strategies to ensure Waco is a safe city. And I think that I can tell that our teams have put a lot of thought into what do we need to do to move further down the field and ensure that this is a safe city, and really appreciate the thoughtfulness towards this.
I'm sorry, I should have let you talk last.
No, great.
Mayor, I'm going to echo the mayor on that. And Ryan, Assistant City Manager Holt, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate the leadership of Chief Summers and Chief Victorian. And when I talk to constituents, I talk about necessary things, possible things, and impossible things. Necessary is always a strong police and fire department. And you've led that group with the 2 chiefs to a spot here in Waco. We're all very proud of this, of your respective forces there. The other necessary is always infrastructure. We already talked about that, but both very expensive to run in 2023, 2024. So, and both of them requiring a little bit of catch up. And particularly what we're talking about today on these police and fire kind of correction to markets this year that we're making. But I appreciate your leadership and the teams that you have there.
Next up, I wanted Paul to explain this quote in really detailed fashion. No, he's gonna cover this slide on business unit approach, because that, as he referred to earlier, is a shift that makes it hard to compare apples to apples in this year's budget. But the right move for us organizationally. So, Paul, you wanna take it?
Thank you, Mr. Ford. The quote there, you see it left, is a famous quote from Dr. Sayer. Really his response to the press in the mid-20th century for government to be run like a business. And so that was his response to that. But certainly, there are elements of public work that we can do and mirror our friends over on the private side with regard to how much does it cost for us to perform a service. And not all municipal services certainly allow us to do that, but where you have cost and direct revenues related to that cost, we're able to mirror what you see in the private sector. It allows us to be more transparent and accountable. Certainly enterprise funds are a big example of that in the city. Those are essentially business units that are at a large scale. Revenues from cost of service pay for the cost to provide the service. In the general fund, it gets a little more difficult. That's where all of our sales tax revenues, property tax revenues come in, and then we have functions that we support with those revenues. This year, we are carving out from the general fund a couple of things and putting them into that separate fund. We talked about the street maintenance fund at length today, and that really gets to the fact of how do we recover the costs in the most equitable and effective way for the demand users, right? And then we show the costs accordingly. So we're breaking that out into a separate fund. And related to that, we've talked about this previously as well, as a Parks Performance Fund. Again, not changing how we provide services in the Parks Department, but more how we account for the services that we provide. And so looking at those cost recovery units in the Parks Department, this is something that I believe the City of Arlington actually started a few years ago, probably 15 years ago, to allow you to see more correctly how much are tax dollars subsidizing certain recreation activities. Not that you would quit doing it, but it helps you to see this is how much they're supported by the fees they charge, and this is how much supported in tax dollars. So again, moving more towards business units where we can in the general fund this year with two major changes.
Only thing I'll add there, and I mentioned this at a prior, I can't remember if it was a council meeting or budget and audit, but on setting that Parks Performance Fund in that manner, you know, it's my goal as manager to set realistic revenue or cost recovery percentages for these various business units. But the cost recovery percentages are not going to be one size fits all, right? So for a rec center, it's very low, for instance. For a Mammoth site, it might be much higher. Or for golf, you know, ideally it's 100% cost recovery. And so I just don't want the public to be led down a road to think, well, we're going to be trying to have full cost recovery for an aquatics program or an athletics program. And so there's probably some work I need to do to add some communication to that so that we're clear. As I set targets and thresholds with my management team, y'all also are aware of those and know what I'm trying to manage towards. And that way you can kind of take down any frustrations that might be out in the community or rumors that might get started in the community that we're trying to make money off of fill in the blank program.
I think this is great, Bradley and Paul. I mean, the cost center approach, I guess is what it's called in the private sector. But I think it's good because you're right, it helps measure the individual deals instead of throwing all the money into one pot and then kind of seeing where everything lands. Try to at least see if the enterprise is paying for itself or what level of support it requires from the taxpayer. So I think that transparency helps. The other thing I'm thinking about on it, you've got a great group of managers here, and this is fantastic. They're all here today. I appreciate y'all coming. If you can't see on TV, you need to flip the deal. All the important people in the city of Waco are out in our audience today. But creating ownership at that management level, I think is very important. And I know you can't do incentives, but somehow reward, budget. If you're staying on budget or you're building revenue through the user fee portion or controlling costs thoughtfully, that should be rewarded at that manager level also. But this is a great idea. I love this slide.
Councilmember Holmes, you're definitely thinking in a similar way to, I think, our team is thinking that that measurement can be used as an inflection point on a site's performance. I think back to when I was assistant city manager, we looked at, I think it was the zoo, cost recovery at the zoo over like a 6-year period, and noticed that we had slipped from, like a 60% cost recovery down into the 40s over 5 or 6 years. Well, that's material to the general fund, and it's both a revenue problem and an expense problem. And so then that measurement allows us to get around the table and say, all right, what are we going to do? Is 60% the right goal is a question, but also why are we sliding in the wrong direction? Is it our guests aren't spending enough money in the cafe, or decisions we're making? And so I really like the approach, the cost center approach, and think it does give us a management tool to really equip those business units to be more successful, and down the road, decrease the exposure they have to the general fund. Or at least not make it worse. All right. It typically all starts in parks, but actually I'm going to close out my comments with parks. Deidre's the only one that laughed. Is Jonathan not here? I thought I'd at least get a giggle out of Jonathan. But, oh, he's here. I heard him. Okay. Nothing? All right. Well, we, the staff and council, have really put a lot on the Parks Department agenda over the last few years, and it really shows with the projects that we're doing. It shows with the projects that have on the list for this year as well. And I really appreciated one of the quotes that Paul put in here, the second one in particular. I think this was a philosopher from the 20th century as well, maybe 19th century, I don't know. He was digging way back there in the past, but I do think, I do identify with this quote. I really, as a manager, think that great neighborhoods have to have great parks, have to have connected open spaces for people to really thrive in a community. And so that's why you see me always excited to add value to capital improvements through parks. We do have a couple neat projects this year. One that's relatively new, of course, is the China Spring, addition of a park in China Spring. We acquired park site last year, plus or minus 85 acres. The $3 million you're seeing here is for the first phase of construction. So those are the first construction dollars that we're funding through that program. And then on the regional park at Floyd Casey, this is the final year of 3, I believe, years of funding. Is that right? Which will total $26 million of total resources available to create a regional park at the site of the former Floyd Casey stadium, and really, more appropriately said, the Hart-Patterson track complex. As we've mentioned, that will include all abilities playground and all abilities elements that I think are going to be really special for the community, not only that is right around that site, but also for the region. I think because of how we're going to connect it with trails and the amenity that we're bringing there, we'll see people from all areas of Waco take benefit of that park site. And then lastly, a couple of operational elements that I wanted to talk about on the quality of life component. I am seeking resources to create a new program on beautification. This is a new one in that I want to fund a position as well as some dollars to better maintain and beautify key city corridors. I don't know how much time y'all spend in other communities around Texas. Some more than others. Councilmember Bearfield spends a lot of time in a lot of other communities through her work. But what I've noticed in other communities is in their key corridors where traffic's higher, whether it's local traffic or non-local traffic, there's an intentionality to the details, whether it's landscaped areas, traffic boxes, traffic signals, that we have not crossed the threshold on that here in Waco yet. Maybe in portions of downtown we have, but as I think about Franklin or Waco Drive or Valley Mills, those are the three in my mind. As I drive down them, I see a lot of opportunity to beautify those key corridors and show that we're a clean city, and clean typically in people's minds equals safe. The feeling of safety equates to clean, and so that's a new program. I don't have the capacity necessarily to support it in any of the existing staff that I have, so I am looking to add a staffer that'd be their job. And not to go necessarily clean up those spaces, but to contract for cleanup, as well as to contract for beautification, as well as to seek outside resources like TxDOT's Green Ribbon Funds, where we can amplify the level of support on these key corridors. So that's a new one. I know I haven't fully baked this one, but that is included in my budget proposal, and I'll take any questions you have for me on that one, since I'm hitting you kind of cold on it.
This is a passion of mine. Of all the things we're doing, I know it seems small compared to the infrastructure needs and the public safety needs in our community. But I also really think as Waco grows, we want to have someone who is being thoughtful about the aesthetic of our city as well. So I appreciate staff's putting some energy and thoughtfulness into this.
I kid you not, I got an email this weekend about medians.
Really?
About what the upkeep of our medians was on Waco Drive and how it is different in parts of cities and so I am equally excited about this. I think that it will just create a different perspective to know that someone's whole job is to be eyes and ears on the street at what it looks like, because that equates to what it feels like. And when you go in downtown should not be the only attention-focused area of our community. I know it's not. However, it's beyond the scope of what staff we have and manpower hours we have right now. So I think this is a great idea, and I, like the mayor, and completely support that.
Thanks. And just while we're here, talking about parks, because we don't have another formalized council meeting this month, I want to take just a second to thank Jonathan Cook and the Parks Department again for 4th of July celebration.
Here.
And I was there. I saw him flipping burgers and slinging hot dogs, and I know that it was not an easy cleanup and setup. So I just want to thank you for that again.
Yep.
And I mean, you know, we talked about their these capital investments of particular heft for this upcoming budget year. But make no mistake, the increase of parks in District 1 alone, and the work that has been done with the Doris Miller Community Center, the work that will be continually done as you advance the pool area. I mean, all of that is huge and game-changing for not just the city of Waco, but, you know, well, District 1 specifically, but the city of Waco. And attention that has not been made in the past and that is being made right now, and that's generational change. And so super proud of parks. I need to, point of personal privilege, thank all the department heads that came out for the ribbon cutting. If nobody else tells you, that meant so much to me to look out and see y'all. I mean, I get the people in the community and the kids and da-da-da-da-da, but
it's important.
I mean, you know, but I mean, it may have nothing to do with human resources. It may have nothing to do with transit, but you were there, and that meant a lot to me. So, thank you.
I think I mean,
I
that's
also want
to,
to thank staff. Bradley, didn't mean to interrupt you, that's rude. But thank you for doing something at Floyd Casey. I know that's going to benefit District 2 just in the area that it's in. And it's really going to bring us up to a different level of the neighborhood. I'm excited about it, and I know a lot of my constituents are excited about being able to come back to District 2 to buy homes now. And it's amazing, and it's really exciting for me to look at what's going to happen and what's going to happen. And y'all's thoughts about this, I want to thank Jonathan as well for helping with the park rendering. I think everybody in the city of Waco is going to be able to enjoy this park, not just the citizens of Waco, but there have been a couple of times that I've met up with folks at some of our parks that are from Temple and other little cities around us. So our citizens are not the only ones that are taking advantage of our parks. So thank you all for coming up with this idea of a new park for District 2 and right in the middle of the district, right in the heart of the district. I'm excited about it. So thank you for that.
I think those comments combined with Councilmember Bearfield and Councilmember Ream's comments as well, just really bring home that quote from Ruskin. You know, the quality, our city's greatness to be found in the quality of its public spaces, its parks and its squares and its community centers and its aquatic centers, and where people engage each other matters so much. And that's really encouraging to hear your comments. And I'm sure it's encouraging to the parks team that's hustling hard to deliver these projects. So thank you all for those.
And I want to say, as the Waco City Council member for District 3, no one is more proud of District 3 than I am, although I will concede with Valley Mills, Hewitt Drive, Franklin, and Waco Drive, all major commercial corridors within District 3, there is small room for improvement on an aesthetic front for those corridors. So
Did you
I will
just add a road to the program? I think you did. You slipped in.
I'm just throwing out a future, you know, there may be some aesthetic room for growth.
He just needs it in the minutes.
It's your turn, Jim.
That's right.
All right. Well, I'm gonna, that really concludes my portion of the commentary. 14 slides. It took me like 10 minutes per slide, and I'm told that Nick's remaining slides, which are 25 or 26 slides, he will not take 14 minutes per slide. Him and Paul think they have about 30 minutes left. So I say that to say, do y'all want to break for a few minutes and come back, and I'll turn the mic over to these guys who are going to work through the next slides faster. And I think we've got about 30 minutes remaining in the meeting.
Yep, let's take a 5-minute break and we'll resume at 3:35. Convene our meeting.
Turn it over to Nick Sarpy, our finance director.
All right. So we will get started with economic drivers, which were the basis for much of what Bradley and team talked about. So on this slide, you'll see some major economic drivers affecting the fiscal year 24 budget development, which included inflation, compensation, and the rise in healthcare costs. And on this slide, you'll just see some historical information from the Conference Board, which is the Economic Outlook, as well as future perspective of where they see the economy going. You can see, and you hear narrative where they see in the future, they project inflation to come back down to the core rate of 2% that the Federal Reserve aims for, which strips out food and energy costs from it. And you see the various changes over the year that this slide shows. All right, so this slide shows inflation. It shows 4 different metrics of inflation. The Municipal Cost Index, which since 2019 has gone up 23%, which is a combination of all the 3 other factors, which will include the Construction Cost Index, the Consumer Price Index, and the Producer Price Index. All right, and this slide, working with the departments of the city, we gathered input from them on what they're seeing as far as the cost for various inputs for their work. And you can see a lot of these costs have seen significant double-digit increases since fiscal year 19 to what we're projecting for 24.
This is Holmes. There's some math issues on this one too. The 116 going to 195 is more like 80%. I don't know if that, what's your delta percent is off by like a half or something? You see what I'm saying?
We got a column.
Your percent change is more dramatic than what you're reflecting on the table.
To compensate for the other one that was awful.
He's just worried about,
Correct this one.
he's a little worried about the final exam at this point.
Yeah. If they were close, I wouldn't say anything. But this one's like way off. Anyway.
All right, and so as we've talked about previously, some compensation factors that impacted the 5% general salary increase and the market adjustments that we've seen, and just how important competitive wages and work-life balance is to employees, what we've seen out from World at Work, as well as the turnover rate and the burnout rate that public sector sees, which is significantly above on the private sector. So this slide goes into details and shows the inflation cost trend for health insurance and the projected cost increase for health care costs exceeding over 7%. And then the information from our consultant about the funding level for our health plan and being $2 million short. Which is part of the reason why we're doing the 1.6 from the general fund to help balance the fund. All right, so the team works on preparing the budgets for 46 different funds across the city. So this slide shows the changes in FTEs from since 2020 through what we're projecting for fiscal year 24. You'll see we went from 1628 in 2020 up to 1851 in 2024. This includes the positions that Bradley and Ryan talked about for police and fire, so 11 firefighters, 3 additional police officers, and several civilian positions in the general fund. So a combination inspector, a mobility manager, an HR manager, a facilities QA, program manager, and the beautification and culture officer. And then on the enterprise side, you'll see positions for the zoo to plan for the penguin exhibit opening next spring, as well as positions for our solid waste division as they open up and plan to open up the new transfer station. And then you'll see some positions related to our utility billing system and asset management system in order to effectively and appropriately implement that software.
On that slide, do we look at, because we are adding quite a few positions, particularly over the last couple of years, do we look at FTE positions that have gone unfilled for like consecutive 12 months that we are we're operating just fine without? Do we, and I'm not saying we are, but do we look for that where we, because I see us putting on more people these last 2 years. Then obviously some of it's just catch up and we have the need. But are there sometimes positions that aren't filled that we really don't need to even have an FTE?
So that definitely is something we get a report weekly from Missy's team that shows vacancies across the city and how long they've been vacant, whether we're actively recruiting for those positions or not. It's definitely something my team and city manager's office we look at and are definitely evaluating as we go through the budget process and just in general considerations.
Yeah, and I know that the trend over the last couple of years is we're buying some better software systems too to manage some of these processes that hopefully will yield some efficiency in FTEs as well. That's all.
All right, so now we'll jump into property taxes. All right, so this slide shows our certified rolls for 2022. which the appraisal date is January 1st. And then our fiscal year 24 appraisals based on the most recent current information we've received from the appraisal district. And so you'll see the net change in value year over year is about 13% from the certified rolls last year. You'll see that includes almost over $500 million in new added value. You also see that the average home value went up almost 12% from $185,000 to $206,000. So on this slide, you'll see our peer cities as well as several others in comparison of our taxable value per capita in $1,000. So you'll see that Waco is towards the little adder, bottom half of the graph, round the middle at $93. And you'll see at the very top, Austin outpacing the group at $229. And then this slide shows our property tax rates for fiscal year 23. So you'll see that Waco's portion of a resident's tax bill in the Waco ISD School District is 30% of their bill. And I'll reiterate what I've said numerous times. The city of Waco, of all these jurisdictions, is the only one that impacts people's lives on a daily basis.
Do we do this same analysis as a guy, the council member that has 3 ISDs in my district, China Spring, or 4, I should say, China Spring, Midway, and Bosqueville, and WISD. Is it roughly the same split? Do we have 30% in all 4 of those deals?
They're pretty close in their rate numbers, but we can definitely provide you with a graph for each one of them.
Okay, and the 1/3, the 30% context, is that kind of the same as it's always been? I'm trying to get, is that more or less, or is it always 30%? I understand this better in context, or I will.
I mean, it's been fairly consistent. I mean, MCC's kept their rates pretty consistent for the last several years. The one that's done the most movement of this group has probably been the county and the efforts that they've been doing to set the rate towards the no new revenue tax rate. So there might be some slight shifts over the last several years based off of those efforts that those other jurisdictions have made or haven't changed as far as their tax rate goes.
Okay.
All right, so on this slide, you'll see our proposed tax rate, which is a 1/2 cent reduction from 76 cents to 75.5, which would make it the 3rd year in a row of reductions in the tax rate. And it's the lowest tax rate that we've had in over a decade. So this slide just shows for the average homeowner what their tax bill would look like this year compared to last year. And you'll see there's increases based on the increases in value, not because of the tax rate. Last year, the council did a lot of efforts to reduce tax rates through the homestead exemption increase, the over 65, the disabled persons exemptions, which had a very large impact on the overall tax base.
Just a comment on that one, I'm following my notes here. I mean, there was a huge delta between 2022 and 2023. And I guess if I would have made this slide, I would have highlighted that. That was the big change. And so as we see this one with a little bit of a nominal delta in the positive direction, I think the 2022 to 2023 demonstrated a lot more reduction in tax, whole dollar taxes to residents over 65 with these new exemptions that we put in. So I'd like to see the same thing with over 2024, just to remind, we could have filtered that exemption thing in over 3 years or whatever, or how long. We did it all at once, which I don't want people to forget about that. It hasn't been that, it's just a year ago we did that, which is kind of still in my picture when we talk about tax bills on houses.
Yeah, the historic trend lines kind of show, or will show, I think, that but for the exemptions that were implemented and aren't necessarily reflected here, without those, the jump of whatever this average is, I guess of 267 to 294 would indicate a much higher increase to the tax bill. And so, yeah, I think that is something that it's important to keep in the front of mind, is that these exemptions that remain in place from a couple years ago, as values do go up significantly, and in many ways they're, you know, that's good. Like, you want, as a homeowner, you want your property to appreciate. You don't want your property to be depreciating. But with these exemptions in place, it certainly makes the actual tax bill increase more modest than it would be, but for those exemptions.
And I mean, with the impact as far as last year, yes, our reductions were made in last year, but I don't even know necessarily that it will be felt for real until this year, with the increase. I mean, because it came along, and let's see, if we began in October, you know, right? Fiscal year, so that's when it went into
I think the
effect.
exemptions were felt less.
Immediate-
That they were realized big time. If I'm tracking with what you're saying, but I think they really were. We implemented them for the taxes that were paid this year.
That's right.
Is that right? Am I?
That's correct. That's correct.
No. And I say all that to say, I think that, I don't know that because it wasn't as, you know, there was no big ta-da this year. I think that
Yep.
it's the continuation of our messaging is that even with this and a half cent, I mean, you're still going on a path that is beneficial for you, the resident. And I mean, so it's not that, you know, we have to throw confetti each time, but it's just that if in our messaging is consistent, you know, but for these things, it would be worse. I mean, because I think Galen probably put it in perspective the best for me, on the one, is that we're trying to attack the costs from both sides. So yes, we're, you know, increasing this side, but we're trying to decrease this side to make it not sting as much for our residents, so.
I think to Councilmember's point, the homestead exemption percentage going up means more dollars as your value goes up.
Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah, and it is definitely 2022 because we don't see the old exemption rates in
Sure,
there.
sure.
You know, we've got this one pager that we like to do now, that we added last year to help deduce a 400-page budget to something easy for a resident to understand. That's a really good point to highlight for Monica's team, to not forget what we did and communicate it so that people feel it and see it and have the context that the council members are bringing up. It's helpful.
All right, so this slide shows the breakout of, for an average homeowner, what their average monthly bills, what their different categories of the bills are. And this is based off of the Bureau of Labor Statistics information for the City of Waco area, as well as City of Waco utility rates. So city taxes are only 4.2% of the average monthly budget for a resident. And so this slide shows what you would see on our Truth in Taxation, so the front page of the budget book shows our proposed tax rate of 75.5 cents, our debt rate, as well as our tentative rates for the no new revenue and voter approval rates, all subject to change based off of the final certified rolls that we expect in a couple weeks. All right, so the general fund.
All right, I'm going to go through general fund revenues here. You see in the right-hand side of the screen, upper right, a graph that shows the last, the current year adopted, where we think the year is going to end, and then the proposed budget at right. With the totals at the top, you see that the largest revenue sources are, of course, sales tax in orange, and then property taxes shown in blue. Get into some of the apples to apples kind of discussion we were having earlier. The 2024 budget at $203.7 million includes about $6.4 million of transfer in, we're calling it for budgetary purposes, of $6.4 million from fund balance to help pay for some of the one-time expenses that we have, the expenses that won't recur. So if you're looking at year-over-year dollars comparison, I think the better number is probably to take that 6.4 out of the 203 million. That gets you in the neighborhood of $197 million. And looking at our year-over-year numbers there, the $197 million is about $9.5 million more than we think we're going to take in this year, or a 5% increase overall year-over-year estimates to proposed. Property and sales taxes haven't changed a lot in terms of percent of the budget, both property tax around 44%, and going up a little bit in 24 to 45%, sales taxes being about 27% of the total. And property taxes, as Nick's shown you in the valuations, have gone up. Overall revenues up about $13 million. About 25% of that is coming from value of properties that was added in the 2023 appraisal. Overall, about a 17% increase in revenues, and getting us to a total of around $91 million in property tax revenue. Again, something we talked about just to give some perspective. We've talked about this a number of times. That 91 million comprises about 92% of the cost of police and fire here at the city. Sales taxes have also increased substantially in 2024, but this is really an adjustment that we're making to true up our sales tax projections. The total increase year over year adopted to proposed is $8 million or 17%. However, that 55 million that we have budgeted in 2024, you see, is about 97% of the 56 million we think we'll take in this year. So we're truing up the number, getting the actual budgeted dollars closer to what we're actually bringing in. And so you see a substantial increase year over year adopted to proposed, but based on what we're taking in this year, we're actually a little bit under what we're going to take in this year, and that's primarily attributed to where we are with sales taxes. And I think this slide is informative. Top right it shows a couple of things. And one in blue, you see just the revenues not adjusted for inflation, total net revenues over time, and how they've grown. The orange line is an inflationary adjustment in 2022 dollars across the board. So you see from 05 to 2022, an increase of about $61 per capita over that period. I think it's important to note, if you look in that beginning actually in 06, 07, you see where it starts to dip down actually in a per capita basis, and then recovers in 2014 in terms of real dollars. So the revenue increases that you see there are not driven by more spending, but they're driven by population changes, more people in town, those kinds of things that are driving the total up there. But I think the key thing that we want to look at is the fact that your real dollars over time, we're looking at about a $3.59 increase, I think, from 05 to 22 in terms of real dollars per capita. That leads to another analysis that we looked at on monthly revenues since October of 2021, and that's in the bottom graph that you see there. Green shows the net revenues, and you see how they fluctuate month to month throughout the year. The black line is the rolling 12-month average, and then the orange line is a 36-month average. And not to overwhelm you with statistics or data here, but when you look at the slope of those various lines, the line in green, looking at its increase, it's pretty flat. It actually is declining a little bit over time. So that the growth that we're seeing in green is actually about half of the growth trends for the rolling averages. What that tells us is we might be nearing a point where sales tax revenues in this economic cycle are reaching their peak. And so we are certainly keeping that in mind as we go forward. I think that points out why we've budgeted next year's revenues and sales taxes at about 97% of where we think we'll end this year. Again, trying to be conservative. Sales tax is by far the most volatile revenue source that we have here in the city, and so we're trying to true that up and adjust it upward to closer to what we think we're going to actually receive, but we're not being overly aggressive into the future projections.
My comment on these 2 pages, and it seems, I would start with the expenses first. What are we trying to do? Although the order, I guess, it really isn't that important, but because when I see the budget really go from 175 to 203, that's budget over budget. If you go back to that, yeah, our budget last year was 175 million in general. This year it's 204, which is, what percentage increase is that? It's about 16%, I think. And that to me sounds like a lot more than we need, but I think when we go to the expense side of it and see what we're having to support, to me, I would start with the expenses first, and then how are we going to get to that number? But as it sits right now, yeah, 16% sounds like a big jump when we have, but we're trying to address cost of living, we're trying to address police and fire, we're trying to address infrastructure. Because I hate to start at a place where here's how much money we have, how do we spend it? To me, that's the wrong way to look at it.
Okay.
It should be, here's the expenses, here's what we need to cover, how are we going to pay for it? But it's a little bit semantics, but anyway.
Okay.
The 16% kind of jumps out at me. Until you look at the 187, which is what it actually, what we're really going from, because that's the extrapolated 2023 actual.
Exactly. And I think that's why we put this information in
Yeah,
here, Councilman,
I
to
agree.
show that.
Totally agree.
And again, you know, in Texas, you want to have a balanced budget, and under the Constitution, you have to, and so we're showing that balance here. But again, we have about 7.7 million in one-time expenses, and those are one-time transfers or purchases of armored rescue trucks for the police, for example. $1 million for our Development Services Department to purchase new permitting software. Those kinds of things that won't recur next year, so we're using one-time revenues to offset those expenses. So that's where I'm looking at a true year-over-year, year-end to propose. We're really not that high. We're about 9 million up, about 5% over. So, and again, sales tax makes a big difference there. But I certainly understand where you're coming from, Councilmember, on revenues and expenses, and we'll definitely look at how we present that in the future.
Let's get to the expense side.
Sure. We'll let Nick talk through this.
All right, so this slide shows that the expenditure side for the general fund. So it shows the same 3 bar charts, just on the expense side. So the 23 adopted, about 177.3 million, up to 203.7 for fiscal year 24. That includes increases in wages and benefits that we've talked about previously, including the TMRS COLA number baked into that number, as well as the pulling out of streets and traffic into the street maintenance fund and the parks divisions, not all parks divisions, into the parks performance fund, which is offset by a $2.2 million transfer out to cover those costs that the fees that they generate don't cover. And this also includes $22.6 million transfers from the general fund to the street capacity to do the street capacity work that Bradley and Paul talked about earlier.
And if I might add here just real quickly, this is something that we spoke about earlier, Councilmember Holmes. If you look at, just for example, year 23 adopted salaries and wages are 81 million roughly. And then in 2024, it's 81.2 million. So it looks like it only went up about $200,000. Well, that's the net. We had millions of dollars get transferred out to the Parks Fund, out to the Streets Fund, and then we had millions of dollars added for 5% raises, for retirement adjustments, for those kinds of things. So I think at the budget and audit meeting on the 8th, we'll spend some time going through some detailed sort of reconciliations between these two numbers. Anytime you make these kind of changes in the general fund, it gets really difficult to do a year-over-year comparison because you're certainly not looking at apples to apples. So we'll do a breakdown, a detailed dive on the reconciliation between the two numbers for you at the August 8th meeting, because I think it's important, certainly for council to understand that. We want to be transparent, certainly with the public, on what we're doing. The typical budget presentation, which you're seeing today, just year-over-year numbers, it's not going to really show what's happened in the fund from a dollar standpoint. So with that said, we recognize that there's a lot of detail that we need to break into here. We just felt that this overview presentation was probably not the appropriate place to get into those weeds. So.
Good, yeah, it would be good to see the backup on this, and if I could get a table of all the numbers, you know, Nick, like you have in your quarterly report.
Sure.
The same categories or line items.
Sure.
But yeah, it is hard to follow because the extrapolated total of 179 includes, it's 74 in actual salaries, and then I guess you add those two together, it's about 102 million salaries and benefits.
Yes, sir, and
Which
transfers out or higher.
Well, and that doesn't account for full employment either, right? Because you're gonna have some, the 81.
The year-end number, as you're pointing out, is the 74 million, for example, is based on what we spent to date and the pay period, the amount per pay period, and projecting that over the remaining portion of the year. What that tells you is there's a lot of vacancies.
Exactly.
And for example, police, ACM Hull pointed out earlier that we started earlier in this year, we had 33, 35 vacancies in the police department. That number's come down quite a bit. And so as we reproject that, you'll see that 74.9 go up, because now there's more people actually hired and filling those vacant positions. But this is from our April reestimate, our April monthly report that the council received. And so the change that you see in blue is a great example of just that's attributed to vacant positions primarily across the city.
Yeah, that's why I was a little surprised. If we budgeted 81 last year and we're only going to 81.3 this year, it didn't, and we're talking about 8% vacant.
That's where it gets really confusing to look at, because you've transferred out that slide Nick showed earlier of staffing. If you notice, the enterprise fund number went up a lot and the general fund number came down. That's part of that transferring of funds that you see, or the non-general fund positions went up quite a bit. And so that's part of this reconciliation that we'll need to spend some deep dive time going through a deep dive with council on the August 8th meeting to explain it fully, because just a year-over-year number doesn't really explain what's going on.
Yeah, because I think the easier it is for me to explain to people that it's really a 5% rank and file raise.
Right.
Outside of police and fire, it's a little more than that, just catching up.
Right.
And then we have this COLA thing with TMRS also.
Right.
To break those three down very clearly, I think will help
Right.
me explain why this number.
You'll have the new staff that Bradley and others have discussed previously. On top of that, you'll have, okay, this many people went to the street maintenance fund, this many people are in the park fund, so you'll see those changes.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, so this just rolls through the projections through fund balance, the different fund balance categories for 23, where we're estimating them to be, as well as what we're proposing for the next several years. You'll see for 24, we talk about pulling 4.9 from fund balance for the street capacity, as well as almost $3 million in one-time expenses that the general fund is funding. And one of the big things you'll see on here is our plan to fund over the next several years up to $21.9 million for the downtown development project that was discussed at the budget retreat.
In highlighting here, the 28% revenue of next year's revenues is our policy minimum for our unassigned fund balance. That's essentially our bank account that we hold for economic dramatic economic changes, natural disasters, those kinds of things. Our practice has been to give a little buffer to that at 30%. You'll see in the numbers there that this year, 2023, we think we'll end about $6 million above that amount. And then over the next couple of years, we'll be very close to that 30% number, which is where we should be. And that will allow us to make a new assignment in that downtown money that Nick spoke of. So the point of this graph at its most basic level is to show the city council that we are meeting our policy minimums in fund balance. Actually, we're a little bit above, which is a good thing. And we are looking at future years to make sure that we're in a good position there. Because what you don't want to do is raise taxes just to put it in the bank.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're in good shape there.
Well, and to me, the silver lining on this too, well, this is all great, but that 6.3 million, we're shoving that back into streets, you know? I mean, it's all, or most of it, 5 million of it's gone back into
Right.
street capacity.
Right.
Which is, to me, again, fundamentally, the necessary things are police, fire, and infrastructure. So this is all going back into infrastructure.
Yes, sir.
But before we go on to the next slide, I did want to point out one happy thing that we skipped over, and I'm sorry I didn't jump on it when we did the slide. I won't spend a lot of time on it. But it's the valuation where we show the market value of the entire county and all that stuff, or the city, I should say. The number that jumped out at me was that right in the middle, if you can put the cursor on it, the 553, 442, 676, the new value. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do on this council is bring new businesses in, bring new tax base in. And when I see that number, $500 million, I mean, I can get pretty excited about that, because that gives us more tax base to build the roads, to have a top, best-in-class police and fire department, to build all the bridges and streets and improvements that we need. As we see that number get bigger, and that's probably, it has to be the biggest that it's ever been. I'd be curious. But that's a material number that I think we should all be happy about, because
Yes, sir.
we're all working towards new development.
About 25%. 25% of the change in value is that new value, which is great. And as council's aware, there's a couple of projects in the pipeline that those two alone will be more than that.
Exactly. I broke the rule by going backwards in the slides. I apologize.
No, this is great.
All right, so this slide, as they alluded to earlier, shows the impact for the average residential taxpayer and ratepayer, and the impact that they'll see on the various services and fees on their monthly utility bills or their monthly their property tax bill for the year. So you'll see at the very bottom, because that's where most people's eyes will go to first, the year-over-year increase is about $360. Which is about a 12.5% increase. But on a inflation-adjusted basis, we are still behind as far as the utility bills go compared to 2020. So average bill for 24 will be about $139. If we had kept pace with inflation, it'd be about $141. And the same goes for the property tax bill, that we're still behind on an inflationary basis. Where we're at and what we're proposing for 2024. All right, and then to wrap it up, the budget calendar. So we're going to file the budget this Friday. Certified rolls from McCab will come out on the 25th. We'll be back here on the 1st of August to present the file, formally present the filed budget and the certified tax rolls, give you any updates on potential budget changes based on the certified rolls. We'll have the resolution setting the date for the public hearing on the budget, which will be set for the 29th of August. The second reading on the ordinance setting departments and the ordinance establishing the Park Performance Fund. Then on August 8th, we'll talk about, we'll have TMRS there to give a presentation. We'll do some quarterly financial updates, and we'll give you some updates, and we'll try and bring some on August 1st as well of some of your questions. On the 15th, we'll have the resolution setting the date for the public hearing on the tax rate. We'll have the first reading of the ordinance adopting the street maintenance fee. On the 29th will be the date of the budget public hearing as well as the adoption. The public hearing and vote on the resolution on the municipal drainage utility fee schedule revisions. and then the second reading and adoption of the street maintenance fee. And then last but not least, to close it out, will be on September 5th, will be the public hearing and the first and final reading of the tax rate ordinance. And courtesy of communications
Solid.
and
That was
Kathy,
real good.
Brandon, Tony? Come on now.
Any questions? Team, I can't thank you enough. City Manager's office and all of our department leadership, thank you for being here all day today. I look across this room, and as Bradley mentioned, some of the best and sharpest leaders in our community. Your character's outstanding. I mean, your work product is excellent. I'm so thankful for our city team. To our budget team, thank you so much for your really hard work, creative and thoughtful work to get this done. This is a team effort, and I'm really, really thankful for our team. A couple announcements. We got a couple birthdays this week. Councilmember Andrea Bearfield and City Manager Bradley Ford have a birthday this week. There might be some other people that have a birthday that I'm forgetting, but I know about those two, so I'm going to acknowledge it. And also, this is City Manager Ford's 3rd year anniversary as City Manager.
Oh, wow.
Indeed.
For both of you guys. Great work on the budget. We're going to have a great year. I'm really thankful for our team, and with that, we will adjourn this meeting.
Can I
Yes,
say
ma'am.
something? No, I have an announcement. On September the 15th, on Friday, I just saw our librarian back there and reminded me, we will be having a Hispanic culture
Oh, yeah.
of some of our past leaders in the community in South Waco and the city of Waco. And we're going to be honoring over 10 people. And their pictures are being drawn by an artist. And we're going to have a mariachi group there. And so I'm inviting all of you guys to come on out
Awesome.
and be there on that Friday and help us celebrate our Hispanic heritage, not culture. I told them, no, this is not culture, this is our heritage of the legacy that these folks left for us to build on. Can you remind me about the time? 10 a.m. 10 a.m., guys.
10 a.m. South Waco Library.
We'll be there.
Yes, I would love to see you all guys there so you can see our past heritage and know there was a lot that I had to build on. So that was my announcement.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's going to be a
Right.
great event, and I look forward to being there.
Thank you, Mayor.
And with that, we will adjourn this meeting at 4:16 p.m. Thanks, everybody.